Becoming Yourself with Dr Maev Conneely, Episode 2. This podcast brings together wisdom and tools from coaching, clinical psychology, and mental health research to help you become who you want to be. Welcome back to the podcast team. I'm so excited to have you here to talk about paradigm shifts. Paradigm shifts it's this idea that is in science. A paradigm is the assumptions or the ways of thinking, the ways of perceiving the world. If you write a thesis, at the start you have to say, this is what I consider to be real, and this is how I think we gain knowledge of the world. And that's how you kind of start your whole argument. You have to say, this is the way I'm viewing the problem, basically, so that anything you argue can make sense. And there's this idea in Stephen Covey's book, The Habits of Effective People. That's not quite the title, but I'll put it in the show notes. And his idea is that we have paradigm shifts in our lives and in the same way we do in science. So the idea that Thomas Kuhn first described was that in science we progress in a non-linear way. We don't there are kind of big dramatic shifts where everything changes, the kind of goalposts are reorganized. So something like the change from thinking that the world is flat to the world being like a globe. And that suddenly is a massive leap forward that changes everything about how everyone was thinking and talking about everything, about gravity and the solar system. And so that big change, that big shift in the way people were making sense of things is a big leap forward that kind of dramatically switches up what's possible. And Covey says that this is possible in your life as well. And I think it's definitely true that sometimes in coaching you have a kind of a light bulb moment where the way you were looking at things is suddenly completely turned on its head, and you realize, oh my gosh, I was using an outdated belief system. I was seeing the world as flat, and it's not. And what a relief, what liberation. Now I can see this problem in a whole new light. And what I wanted to talk about today is that concept, basically, and also a really common paradigm that a lot of us aren't aware we have at all. So let me back up slightly and explain what I mean by paradigm. So in science, it's sort of what is real and how you gain knowledge about reality. But basically what I'm meaning now in a kind of general sense is just the way we see the world. So not the way we see in terms of our sense of sight, but the way we perceive and understand and interpret the world. It comes from ancient Greek and it means to display beside or display side by side. So it's about how things are connected to each other and how we explain those connections. And we have these paradigms, these ways of seeing the world in our lives. So belief systems like the belief that the earth is flat. We also have belief systems in our lives and some of them are things that we definitely agree with, and lots of them are things we've never realized that we have. We just think it's kind of true. A recent example of this came into my life when I was talking to my cousin Sheila, and she used the word amatonormativity, which I hadn't heard before. And it's basically this, I'm going to read the definition now, but it's this bias or way of structuring society, the laws, and that I've misexplained that and I can't find my definition now. All right, so it's the structuring of law and society on the assumption that amorous relationships are the norm. So that's Elizabeth Brake said that. So it's this belief that everyone is better off in an exclusive, romantic, long-term coupled relationship. And having having that word, hearing Sheila use the word, made me realize, oh wow, yeah, it's a belief. It's a belief system. That's not the only way you can organize society, the only way you can be in a romantic relationship, or the only way you can be in a sexual relationship, or the only way to kind of organize laws like tax breaks for married couples, or the way, you know, we get invited to parties with +1s for romantic partners. And just having the word made me realize that it's an optional way of arranging life. And that felt like a little mini paradigm shift, because I was aware of a paradigm that I previously hadn't realized I had. I just thought it was kind of true. I'd never thought about it before. And if you can do that with yourself, with the ways you view yourself, it can be so enlightening and kind of break you out of cycles that you might be caught in. I want to do one more image to explain why a paradigm shift could be so life-changing, with the example or the way of seeing a paradigm as a map. So we all understand that the map isn't the territory itself, but it's a representation of the meaningful features of a territory, or some of the meaningful features. So you could have a map that shows the differences in altitude, or that shows the rivers, or that shows kind of who lives there. You could have a tube map, or a map of cycle highways or of roads. And the map you have in front of you is obviously incredibly important for you to get to your destination. Imagine you're in your car trying to get from one side of London to the other side of London, and all you have is a tube map. That would be incredibly frustrating. It would be very difficult to reach your destination. It would be, you just don't have the right information in front of you. So if you imagine a paradigm as that map, the kind of elements, the aspects of the terrain that you think are important, if you've picked up the wrong map, it doesn't really matter how hard you work, how much kind of blood, sweat and tears you put into trying to get to your destination. It's just not going to work, or it'll be extremely difficult. So that kind of image really brought home for me how the way you're thinking about a problem, if we stay with this idea of the map being the paradigm that you have in your head for like a kind of set of beliefs, just like, yeah, the paradigm is so important, and holding an outdated paradigm, or a paradigm that for whatever reason isn't helpful or useful for you at the moment, can just really mess everything up for you. And I think that one of the most common unhelpful paradigms you see in people, and I notice in myself all the time, showing up in different ways, is an all or nothing way of thinking. And what I mean with all or nothing thinking, you could also call it perfectionistic thinking, is a way of looking at things as only valuable if you do them fully or perfectly or the right way. So I'm going to give a few examples, and you can see if these are thoughts you've had before. So you might think, there's no point in doing this unless I do it perfectly. Or I can't go to the gym unless I have a full hour. Or there's no point in having a healthy dinner because I had a really unhealthy lunch. Today's a write-off. Or now that I'm going to be late, I might as well go and get a coffee and be another 20 minutes late. It doesn't really matter now that I'm not going to be on time. Or even not participating in a game if you know you can't win, or if you don't think you can win. Or another way this could show up that's even sneakier is thinking, this is too important a task to only give it, 15 minutes now at the end of the day. This, writing my novel or starting this new project, writing up this paper, I need to block out a whole weekend for it. I need a full 2 days to be able to do it justice. Or if you're trying to eat a certain way, let's say you're trying to eat more vegetarian meals, having one non-vegetarian meal might then make you think, oh God, there's no point now. I've messed up. I'm not going to be vegetarian today. Today's going to be a non-vegetarian week. Actually, whatever. It's going to be a non-vegetarian month. Or I'll wait till the new year. Then I'll be really on it with the vegetarianism and the organization and the saving money. So these types of thoughts, like some of those are more ridiculous than others, but they sound like they could be really common sense. Like they could be helpful, rational, just like true statements about the world. And if they're helpful for you, it could be useful to keep those thoughts. If thinking, if I can't do this fully, then I shouldn't do it at all. If you want to think that way, that's completely fine. I guess what I've noticed a lot with myself is that way of thinking is actually kind of paralyzing, because most things are not done the right way or perfect. And there's never a kind of a perfect day to start writing the novel, and there's often not a full hour to go to the gym. And if you sort of set up a situation, like if you believe this belief system, use this paradigm of thinking that things have to be done in that certain way, then you're really limiting what you can do. You're only kind of leaving a narrow space in which you can operate. And so you can only go to the gym if you have that whole time, or you can only start doing work if you did it exactly on time, or if you have a whole 3 hours to get into the paper. And the chances are, even if you do have these perfect situations, these kind of you do manage to block out a whole weekend to work on your novel, the reality is once you get there, you might find some other kind of excuse or reason not to do it, or way around it. So what I am encouraging is switching from an all or nothing way of thinking, especially if this is an area of your life where you're noticing you're putting a lot of effort in and somehow not getting to where you want to go, that is kind of been a goal for a long time and you're not moving forward on it. I'd encourage you to take a look and see if you are doing some type of all or nothing thinking and kind of sabotaging your progress with that way of thinking. And instead replace it with an incrementalist type of approach, where every little step is seen as a success and worthwhile. And it doesn't feel as kind of dramatic and shiny and wonderful and, oh my God, wow, I've got this whole weekend, I'm going to write these brilliant characters into this novel. It might feel a lot less kind of shiny and glitzy and much kind of more almost dull, like a habit to say, okay, no, I'm just going to pick myself up and do 10 minutes of writing before I start my day job every day. But that, and also it might feel like, oh, that's never going to matter. 10 minutes isn't enough. But imagine, and I think that probably sounds quite reasonable to say, 10 minutes a day, what's that going to be? Like, you'll never get a novel written like that. But if you add up 10 minutes, if you'd started 6 months ago and did 10 minutes a day and only managed, say you only wrote like 100 words, less than 100 words per day, how many words would you have now? You could make up a couple of chapters. And that's just with 10 minutes a day. The same kind of idea often shows up in eating, that people think if you're going to eat a certain way, if you're going to call yourself a vegetarian, if you're going to, stop eating junk food, that you have to do it in this absolute type of way that, on New Year's Day, you wake up, you go to the gym and, you eat celery juice and no biscuits. And then the day that you have one biscuit, it then becomes a big kind of dramatic thing. Like, oh God, now I've had the biscuit, and you've been kind of tensing and kind of forcing yourself to not have any of the treats up until then. And then when you have one biscuit, you think, well, now it's a bad day. Now I'm imperfect. I'm back to my old self who ate biscuits. I might as well eat a whole packet or 2 packets. And of course, one biscuit has a tiny effect on your kind of whatever your goal was, whether it was to lose weight or reduce sugar or whatever. And then, but the 20 biscuits or, the 2 packets or whatever has a much, much bigger impact. So the all or nothing thinking very clearly there has a negative impact on your reaching your goal. And it comes from a place of, it originally sounded like a good idea. I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to do everything absolutely right. I'm going to be perfect. I'm not going to have any biscuit at all. And I'm going to go to the gym for the whole hour. But if you approached this whole area of your life from an incrementalist point of view, where each step is a good thing, then it changes everything. You can celebrate having, 3 biscuits and then not eating the last bite of the last biscuit because every little bit counts. Rather than thinking, well, now that I've started the third packet, I might as well finish the 3rd packet. And it can sound a bit ridiculous, but I think that we've all been there in different areas of our lives where you think, God, well, I might as well, now that I've gone halfway down this road, now that I've waited for the bus and I know it's going to be delayed, I feel like I have to wait the next half hour. And I guess often we don't know how long the bus is going to be and all of that. But basically, yeah, I'm just saying that if you can take a moment to look at your paradigms and kind of recognize the ways they are showing up in your life and the kind of feelings they lead to, it might be really helpful in kind of unsticking you in the parts of your life where you feel stuck, where you feel like the person trying to get across London holding the wrong map, holding a tube map and sitting in a car. And you could have a sort of a light switch moment where you think, wow, this is a belief system. I don't want this map. I need a different map. And then you can start looking for what other type of map you want. But the first step is realizing that you're holding the wrong map, basically. And it's a really important step. And it could feel quite destabilizing. These old paradigms, these old ways of thinking could be a source of pseudo-security. That's what Stephen Covey says. He says that it's often a source of pseudo-security for years and years, and questioning them feels deeply uncomfortable. In the same way, questioning whether the world is flat was probably a very kind of overwhelming and confusing idea that felt all wrong. And thinking, I could go to the gym for half an hour might feel all wrong in the same way. And a lot of the time, I guess I said you might have this light switch, light bulb moment where it just is all clear that you've been looking at it in a way that isn't helpful for you. But it's okay if you don't have that, or if you have that kind of light bulb moment, realize that it's all like a belief system that is outdated and not helpful for you. And then the next day you kind of come back to the old way of thinking. That doesn't mean it's all lost and you're doomed to think this way forever and there's something wrong with you. It doesn't mean that at all. It's just that our brains are really good at habits. We're really good. Our brains love a heuristic. They love a shortcut that's like, oh yeah, this is how we deal with this type of problem. This is how we think when we get into these situations. Once we have 1 biscuit, then we decide to have 20, or whatever kind of habits you currently have in your thinking, also in your behaviors, but in your thinking. And so every time you notice the old paradigm coming up in your thinking, the old way of approaching a problem or a situation, or thinking about yourself or your life or the people around you, you can just kind of calmly, lovingly say, oh, there I go again. Why don't I switch back to this other way of thinking? And it doesn't have to kind of be a big drama or mean anything. And it is effortful, this sort of changing your way of thinking. because of the habits, but it's always the hardest the first few days, or the first kind of initial bit of trying to retrain your brain into thinking in a new way. And then the new paradigm will become a habit. And that's how you can see ridiculous transformation in people's lives over the course of a few months, because these new ways of thinking become habits, and they build on each other in this kind of exponential way then. And, so many things become possible that just weren't possible because of a limiting or old or unuseful paradigm, a paradigm that was no longer serving you. So that is all I'm going to say about that. I think it would be great to see if you can find some of these paradigms, these ways of looking at the world. And you might find them by writing your thoughts out, by noticing, notice the areas of your life where you think in a kind of all or nothing type of way, or perfectionistic type of way. And then you can calmly decide which worldviews, which paradigms you want to keep, which ways of seeing the world, your life, yourself you want to keep, and which ones you don't want to, which ones are painful, or just dull, or just not helpful in some type of way. Okay, if you have any questions, send me a line or find me on Instagram at Dr Maev Conneely, or on my website at drmaevconneely.com. And thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Bye, team.